My name is Godfrey. I originally come from Zimbabwe, but I work with the United Nations in New York, in Zimbabwe, my home country, in South Sudan, and now here in the Netherlands. I'm working for UNOCHA, which is a United Nations agency that is responsible for coordinating large-scale humanitarian crisis. So when there's a big event, let's say there is a huge earthquake in the country that's involved, request for international assistance. So we help coordinate that sort of response. It could also be due to conflict, for instance, in areas like, say, Afghanistan or Syria or Yemen, and you have many parties there providing humanitarian assistance. Will be there supporting and coordinating that assistance. And I work for part of the United Nations for a part of UNOCHA that's called the Center for Humanitarian Data. But maybe before I go into that, I just wanted to talk also a little bit more closely about what UNOCHA does. It's, you know, we help humanitarians save the lives of people that are caught up in a crisis, as I mentioned. So we assemble and we have strong relationships with the world's governments and humanitarian organizations, including UN partners and NGOs and local communities. So we mobilize international assistance when governments request help with emergency response, and we bring national and international partners together, often hundreds at once, to deliver the best possible assistance. So this is an assembly sort of role. We also alert and inform. So what this means is that we are the central hub for humanitarian information and analysis. When a crisis occurs, we have the big picture view of the crisis. So we don't ourselves provide, you know, assistance in the terms of items that are given to beneficiaries, but we sort of coordinate at this level. And this knowledge allows humanitarian organizations to deliver help in ways that will have the most impact on the people caught in crisis. We help all aid organizations understand and navigate the complex challenges that they face, and our information services and networks are vital to humanitarian operations. We also help to advocate for solutions, so decision makers depend on our knowledge to understand what's happening. And we also provide funding. We mobilize funds and resources to make sure people's needs are met during a crisis. And we ensure that funding decisions that are made are based on common understanding of the context of a crisis. So this is us as in UNOCHA, which is part of the United Nations. And you mentioned there, we have a lot of talk in there and mention in there about information. So within UNOCHA, we're working in a department called the Information Management Branch. And within that, this is where the Center for Humanitarian Data is situated. But the Center for Humanitarian Data, being part of that setup of the United Nations, it is based here in the United Nations or UNOCHA office that's based in the Hague, at the Hague Humanity Hub. We've been there since 2007, and really our mission as the center is to increase the use and the impact of data in humanitarian responses. There's a lot of data being collected. We want to see the data being used more. We want to see that the use of data having more impact and positive impact for the people that are caught up in humanitarian crisis. While the Hague might be sort of our central HQ, if you would, for the center, but we also have presences in many different parts of the world, like New York, in Dakar, Nairobi as well, and many of the other locations that you need. So we also have a global footprint as well that helps us to deliver on our mission. And before I go, you know, into the details about the center's work, I just want to take a step back and just define for you what we mean when we say humanitarian data. I mean, data is actually a very loaded word. It means different things for different people. For us, it means data about the context of the crisis. So we define data about the context in which this humanitarian crisis is occurring, and we're looking at the baseline or the development data that existed before the crisis happened, data on damage assessments, data on geospatial data, like what are the administrative boundaries in this place where in a crisis is happening, or the roads, or any baseline information that helps humanitarian get a better understanding of the context in which a crisis is happening. Then we're also interested in data about the people that are affected by needs. So things like profiling data for internally displaced persons. So how many internally displaced persons are there in the different camps and locations where they are gathered, the breakdown by age, by gender, and this sort of information that people need to be able to make informed decisions about the delivery of aid. And we also talk about data about the humanitarian response. So we mentioned that there could even be hundreds of organizations working together to try and deliver humanitarian assistance to people affected by crisis. But these humanitarian organizations, each having different mandates, and they're trying to work together to deliver on this goal. So there's a lot of data that can help understand how these organizations are responding. So some of these include one important one that we call the who is doing what where. So it's a data set of which organization is responding with which type of assistance in which location, and really helps, for example, for organizations not to be wasteful. So you don't have a lot of assistance going in one area of work or one thematic area, and so forth. Also, even information about financial track flows and the like. So those are the major buckets of humanitarian data. Although, as you will see later on, we are delving into predictive analytics and advanced data science techniques that also open up an avenue into other different types of data that we're not looking for, that we're not looking at previously, maybe data that allows us to make forecasts and the like. So this is the data that we look at, and what we are trying to achieve with through our work is to see data, being a bit faster. We want to speed up the flow of data from the point of collection to the point of use to make a decision. Sometimes a data point might be collected and it takes weeks and weeks and weeks before that data point is actually involved in a product that is used for decision making. So we want to increase that. We want to increase connections among people that are working with data. We want to have work with more organizations. We also want to see more organizations working more closely amongst themselves. And we also just want to increase the use of data in general, just to be more data driven. So these are some of the key results that we are trying to achieve in our work. And we have focused on 4 areas of work. These are data services, data responsibility, data literacy, and predictive analytics. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive on data services and also on predictive analytics, because I think the group that we have today could find those two a bit more to their liking, if I may say, or more interesting to their day-to-day work. So on the data services part, we operate the Humanitarian Data Exchange, which is UNOCHA's open platform for data sharing, and I'm just going to show you this shortly. But we also support the adoption of the Hexel standard, which means Humanitarian Exchange Language, which is a simple standard for sharing what we call messy spreadsheet data, because we have a lot of spreadsheet data that flows around in our humanitarian operations, and this standard helps to make the sharing of this data a little bit more smooth. And we also support the adoption of the International Aid Transparency Initiative within the humanitarian community, the IATI standard, which is being used to make it easier for organizations to share information about how they are using aid, so that it brings about a lot of transparency in how aid is working, and everyone can see what everyone else is doing. So, but I said I'm going to come back a little bit more into the HDX platform, but I just need to move on a bit into data responsibility. And in data responsibility, we are working to increase trust and cooperations across organizations that are sharing data in the humanitarian response. So we lead, data, just call it data responsibility work, the responsible use of data within the OCHA system. We've just recently developed the OCHA's data responsibility guidelines. So this is for our own organizations, as well as the sector-wide data responsibility guidelines, which contain, tools and procedures and processes that organizations can use to be more responsible when they are handling and working with sensitive data, including key actions, key outputs, key tools to help staff and partners navigate the technical as well as the ethical aspects of working with sensitive data. So this is what we also do in data responsibility. You can ask more questions about that later if you're interested in that. We also work with data on data literacy, which is around making the humanitarian community a little bit more fluent when talking about data. So we work a lot in our work with information management officers who are really well versed in data, but the larger part of the of aid workers are not maybe information managers, but people that come from other different backgrounds where they might not have this strong training in dealing with data and information. So we're just trying to bring these skills to this larger group, just to make sure they speak the same language, at least, even if it doesn't mean that they will be able to do these advanced data tasks themselves, but they sort of understand what is available, what can be done, what this means, what a technical term might mean, and so forth. And this is also another growing part of our work, and we are producing materials that are available at the moment on our website that people can go to and work with. And some of them are also quite advanced topics, like we have one tutorial on using statistical disclosure control techniques and methods, which could be interesting for some in this group. And that is predictive analytics. This is a newer part of the portfolio of our focus of work, and what we are doing here is working with support partners who are working on predictive models that are used for use in the humanitarian sector. For instance, the Red Cross here in the Netherlands, the Red Cross 510 team have developed some models that we also could also come in and support in various aspects of those. We also manage a peer review framework. So we as more organizations start using within our sector, start using predictive analytics and these advanced data science, we provide a framework for which we could come in and do peer review, so that we can be sure of the the technical and the ethical rigor of the models that we are using in the community. So that's around the peer review framework, and also building capacity and community. And then there's one aspect that I'm going to zero in on later, which is on anticipatory action, which is when humanitarians, instead of waiting for shocks or for there are certain disaster types, for instance, flood, where you can have a little bit of warning, or even a long bit of warning, like they are coming. And if we could act at that early point, it really is more efficient and more, it leads to a more dignified as well response, and which is also cheaper. So we are also heavily involved in that, and I'm going to also dig, just deep dive a little bit into that later on. But as I mentioned, the Humanitarian Data Exchange, which is our portal for open data sharing. So organizations, humanitarian organizations who are members, who can, and any humanitarian organization can join after a light vetting process, because we have to make sure that they're really humanitarian organizations. But after that light, they can join and be allowed to share their data on the platform. So this has really become the go-to place for humanitarian data on the internet. You can see the URL there, data at humbdata.org. 1.3 million users in 2020, also driven by in part by the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have 27 data grids for humanitarian operations. So data grids are curated collection of data sets for specific locations that we as the HDX team curate, and they are just ready for use. And 2.2 million downloads as well in 2020. So huge figures, just go to show how the HDX platform is really the place where people come to and are using for their data. And I'm just going to try and I hope this works nicely. Okay, it works. So this is the platform, and I hope you can see it. So this is our homepage, 18,600 data sets at the moment. So you can come in and search for data. For instance, we can search for, I'm just going to use COVID-19, and we can see all of the data sets that are based on COVID, that have something to do with COVID-19. There's a filter here for CADs, for geodata, or for data sets with quick charts, or data sets that have administrative divisions, or by location, different formats. The different organizations that I mentioned actually all have shared this data. So in the different licenses and different tags, so you do that. This one here is also suggesting that we go to the COVID-19 pandemic page. This is a page that we have also curated with to show COVID-19 data. And you can see this data set on COVID-19 vaccinations that has been shared by a different organization. It's got it also comes in with a data visualization just to highlight how the data is being used. And here you can just click here to download the file, and you can make use of it. So there's no need to register on HDX. It's an open platform. So if you need to find data, this is the place. This is the place for you to go. And I'm also just going to show you what I mentioned when I said we have the data grids with 18,000 data sets. So sometimes this data grid maybe helps us to zero in on at least on these key categories of humanitarian data, like what we can see here. For Afghanistan, you can see the information for the data for internally displaced persons is already available and can be downloaded, or for funding, or for different other categories. And we have this sort of grid arranged like this for 27 other locations that have a humanitarian response plan currently ongoing. So this is the just a brief introduction to HDX. There's a lot more for you to see, but in the interest of time, I will move on to something else. So I mentioned that we have the data grids curated collection of the most critical data sets that are commonly found in use across most humanitarian contexts. So, it's also interesting for someone who's moving between contexts. They can also go and find, if I'm looking for returnees data or refugees data, you just go to the data grid and you will find the curated data set for refugees for that particular country. And so these are categorized into 6 categories and 21 subcategories. So these are the main categories, and within those categories there are the sub categories, and we use the data grids as a proxy for the availability of open data in the humanitarian sector. Each year we produce, so what we are seeing now is just a summary of the completeness. So in some categories we don't find data, which is also a challenge that we have. So sometimes we don't find the data that we need. So this one here is just showing that across all of the 27 countries, 62% of the data is like complete. So everything is perfect. Well, not perfect, but everything meets our criteria. But 21% it is sort of incomplete in that some of the criteria, key criteria is not met. And in 17%, we actually don't have data for that particular subcategory. So, using this data, and we use this as a proxy for the availability of open humanitarian data, and we produce the state of open humanitarian data report based on this on the completeness of the data grids, which is going to come out very soon. And also just on HDX, so I was just showing you all of the data that is shared on the platform, and this is just an example of how some of this data can be brought together and used, for decision making, for generating insights, for stoking interest in different topics. So here is the HDX COVID-19 Data Explorer. So we bring it together we're bringing together, different layers like the cases and death, people in need, funding, immunization, all coming together into one visualization that people can come to and consult and see, what is happening around COVID. And we focus on the humanitarian countries, right? I mentioned the earlier, countries with what they call an HRP or humanitarian program plan. So there are 27 of them as of last year, but there's also something called the Global Humanitarian Overview, where you have about another group of countries that way we are also interested in, because they're also involved in one way or the other in the international humanitarian system. So this is an example of data coming together. There are many more examples that I will just flip through. This was a couple of years ago, community feedback to inform the Ebola response in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Another great example of how data comes together. And this was used extensively internally in the DRC to inform information, especially on rumors around Ebola. So we had rumors, maybe misinformation around Ebola back then. Now we now see it maybe a little bit more broadly in the world. With COVID-19, we also see we still have the same issues, but that's just interesting. And many other data visualizations that are really interesting. These stories, data stories, use data to tell to really bring out the journeys that individual refugees go through, and they're really captivating. Now, I would suggest, and I would recommend that you also take a look at these, which are quite interesting and illuminating. This is where this is from quite a while ago, from 2014, in fact, when we didn't have open data those days in our sector. And in fact, on the first Ebola outbreak, in West Africa, most of the data was coming out as a PDF, and we took this data and started digitizing and making it available as a spreadsheet, so that until eventually it was picked up by the New York Times, and then they created these very insightful visualizations that really shed light on the situation in that was happening at the time, but also to a really wide audience, which was really incredible at the time. So we have many more examples, but I will just move on now to talk more about predictive analytics. As I said, I'll just do more of a deep dive in. And this was our Undersecretary General last year, who was saying that it is one of the biggest opportunities we have to try to use data so that we can predict the next, to be more anticipatory, to predict what is about to happen and trigger responses a little bit earlier. I'm really not going to go into here, but I just want to highlight that I mentioned we have predictive models. We have put together some sort of who's doing what, way, and when around predictive models. So the list of all the predictive models that are in our sites are available. I'm not saying that we have made these models, but these are all of the models that are sort of in the humanitarian sector. So if anyone has an interest in modeling in the humanitarian sector, this would be a good place to sort of start and see what is out there. But what I wanted to talk about is this anticipatory action, which is one of our key areas with the greatest opportunity, especially for having impact on people that are affected by crisis. So anticipatory action is action taken in anticipation of a crisis, as you can see here. And the blue line is the number, shows the needs with anticipatory action, and the red line is the traditional response, where we wait for something to happen. And so any action that we take with the intention to mitigate the impact of the crisis and to improve the response. If you take any action before we have either before we have the shock or before substantial humanitarian needs have already manifested. So it is a proactive intervention which takes place upon the issuance of a warning or activation of a trigger. This is why I just wanted to highlight these triggers. This is also in the center. This is where most of our work around anticipatory action is in helping really define, in really making these trigger mechanisms work. Because so the center provides support to UNOCHA and its partners to develop the mechanisms that trigger our anticipatory action frameworks. And we conduct historical analysis and assess available models and forecasts, and we design triggers and mechanisms for anticipatory research. And the other things that we also act as a technical translator, ensuring effective communication between modelers and forecast producers and humanitarian decision makers. Humanitarian decision makers might not necessarily understand the language that modelers and the models are telling them, and we act as that person that goes in between, who understands both worlds. We understand the humanitarian world, we understand it very deeply. That's what we do every day, but we also have the technical expertise within our team to also understand the science and the data science and all the other tools that are used for modeling. So this is what we do. I'll quickly just for 1 second show you our anticipatory action page where we explain our role and also just show you some of the current frameworks that we have that are actually working. So we have one for Malawi for dry spells, it has been endorsed. So when they are green, it means that there's a plan, an anticipatory action plan that is already in place. There's a trigger mechanism in place, and all we are doing now is monitoring that country. And if the trigger is reached, then the plan will be activated, and people will get assistance before the shock actually gets out of hand. And this will be something also that will be, I think, would be interesting for those who are into modeling. And we have all of the additional information for each country that for which we have these activations. So you can see the activation announcement, the and different reports that are available for these countries. Maybe moving forward, just the last point is that we have a peer review process that we set up for predictive analytics in the humanitarian sector. And the goal of the peer review process is to create standards around the use of predictive models within the sector, right? And these are around three areas, three criteria, which is the ethical, humanitarian relevance, and technical rigor of the models. So the ethical review involves identifying all the stakeholders and concern related to how the model could be used. And the humanitarian relevance review will assess the actionability or the usefulness of the model output for humanitarian crises, while the technical review assesses the code and the technical documentation of the model to identify and evaluate the theoretical foundations of the model. And why I ended here is that this is one area where we need reviewers, people with technical skills who can actually review a model against that technical criteria, or I don't know, maybe around, but mainly around the technical criteria of models. And you can sign up for those who are interested and who have the technical skills, and they can sign up and apply to be reviewers. Will be part of our reviewer pool, and we'll be very happy to get it. I think that's all the time I have. I will end here, and thank you very much, and wait to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very fascinating. We have questions in the channel. I would encourage also the audience to send their questions. We have a question from Lakshmi. Lakshmi, do you want to ask the question yourself, or shall I read it?
Oh, I can ask it myself.
Go ahead, please.
Thanks, myself. Yeah, so basically, because you receive multiple models from multiple organizations, how do you validate the results or the insights that you get? As in, which results are most reliable, and if you want something more in them, then whom to request for that additional insight?
Godfrey?
You're on mute.
I think you're on mute, maybe.
Oh, sorry, I had put myself in mute, and now I was struggling to find where the unmute button is. No, that is an interesting question. So we do sometimes make use of models from different organizations, but this peer review process that I've mentioned is perhaps the one that I would say is the one that we use to gauge the technical aspects of models. Not just technical, but there's the technical, there's the ethical as well. Like even this ethical as well as its relevance for humanitarian use, for use in the humanitarian sector. So we do have a number of models, and they've then gone through this sort of process before they are incorporated into our own maybe trigger mechanisms. So that's how it sort of it works. We ourselves have only developed. We do not really go into the business of developing models ourselves. We only have one model that we have ever worked on. It's called the UNOCHA backing model. It was around COVID-19 forecasting in very specific humanitarian context. But when we use external models, there is that peer review process that comes in, and we do have quite a strong team of data scientists within our who are part of our staff, who are experts in different sort of areas that sort of work together and come together to do this kind of work as well.
Okay, yeah. That's clear.
Thank you very much. I have one more question from me.
Yes.
So I just wanted to ask, I can imagine maybe that some of the data that is being published, Godfrey, can be used by people or groups that do not have the purpose of humanitarian help or support. So maybe tourist organizations or organizations that are into more self-economic interests. And I'm just wondering if there is something that you are taking into consideration as an organization in publishing data.
Absolutely, yes. That is something that we are taking into consideration. And I just wanted to see if I could stop my presentation quickly and show you something else. But what we have for every data set that comes onto HDX, we have a process, a quality assurance process that every data set goes through. And that quality assurance process, and part of that is to ensure that the data that's being shared is safe to share. So one of the things that we look for is personal information, names, and so that people cannot be re-identified. But we also go ahead and use statistical disclosure control method to make sure that even without this personal information, that the data still cannot be used to re-identify people. So that's on one area. So we're protecting individuals, but we also through the same QA process also ensure that using our knowledge of the different contexts in which we work. So for instance, we would not share, while we would share, say, health facilities data in one context. For example, we would not have big issues, let's say, by sharing information about the health facilities in a place like, say, Zambia, as opposed to another place like Yemen, where it could be more sensitive. So we also do that type of contextual analysis, and to make sure that the data that we are allowing to be shared on the platform is also sensitive to these different contexts that we work in. So we do not always actually share all data sets on HDX. We actually look at three different after this QA process. We look at the data set and say, okay, this is not sensitive, we can actually share it publicly on HDX, and then some of them, it's uncertain, this sensitivity. We can still allow it in some certain instances as private data shared just within an organization, so only the members of that organization can use it, or we don't allow it on HDX at all, but it has to be, there's a process that we call HDX Connect, where we share the fact that we have this data set available. You have to request it, and then when you request it, we then go into a process of making, or at least the data contributor and the requester go into a process of making sure that the sensitivities around the data are protected. So sometimes in most, it might end up meaning that that person who has requested the data will not be given the data, maybe because it is too sensitive to share with that particular person, or vice versa. Maybe this could just be a colleague working in the same, context, and has been sort of approved to get the data, then the data is shared. So this is HDX Connect. Then of course, in some cases, it's just a no. We cannot have that data shared on HDX just because it is too sensitive. So this is our process. And I hope
yes,
that,
thank you. Thank you.
you.
I see we have 2 more questions, just for the sake of time. Maybe Jan and Chill, I see you have questions. Maybe Jan, you can start with your questions, and then we go to Chill's questions. And after that, we go. Go ahead.
My question is short. How do you train and incentivize all those people from all those different places to add clean data, to add data in a way that's helpful for you, so that you can process it and upload it to HDX?
One of the ways, I mean, that is a big issue. So one of the things that we use to incentivize the sharing of data in the first instance is to allow people to share the data in the formats that they already have the data available in. So this is a huge barrier, just because people have different systems and so forth. So we allow people to share their spreadsheets in the way that they are, but we also provide this humanitarian exchange language that they could use, which is a very light standard that they can use that helps with interoperability of data. And then for other data sets, we also offer the services of data visualization as an incentive sometimes for sharing the data in the format and in with the granularity and the frequency that we required. And then also we're also beginning to see a lot more organizations themselves having seen the successes of from all the advantages of open data, also just becoming more likely just to share data. So we actually have some people just come and say, oh, I would like to share my data on HDX. We don't actually have to go and search for them. And we're beginning to see that also happening. So that's what we're saying. But we have to say that some of the data is not exactly in the, it's not exactly in the same formats. There might be a little bit of work that you might need to do in some of the data sets to get them to work in exactly the same way you would like, but we don't have one format for all of the data on HDX.
Thank you. Chill, would you like to ask one of your questions, just for the sake of time?
Yes, well, maybe the first one. Was your group also in, or is it your group involved in monitoring the Sustainable Development Goals? Is that based on your data?
I would say not, just part of it. So some of our data is relevant to one of a few of the Sustainable Development Goals, but we are looking more at humanitarian data. So this is a very special type of data, sort of a niche that looks at a specific population, people that are really vulnerable and are receiving humanitarian life-saving assistance from the international, people that are in crisis.
So maybe if I then can quickly switch to my next question, were you involved in development of this Optimus model of the Tilburg University by the Zero Hunger Lab? They make special models for optimizing the supply chain in crises, humanitarian crisis.
Maybe I would have to get back to you on that very specific question on the Optimus one. So not one that I could answer off the top of my head, unfortunately. but I'll get back to you on that one. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah, that would be great. Maybe connect with each other and then share information. That would be great. Thank you. Thank you, Godfrey. Really amazing, fascinating talk. And the platform looks, yeah, I have used it a couple of times. Looks amazing. So thank you very much for the talk. How would you see your organization and your department and the work that you do on your platform? How do you see it in 3 years? Where would you like to see?
Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult question for me. I mean, my organization, really, the United Nations, well, it's a huge organization. It's very difficult for me to make one statement about where I would like to see that in 2 years, because there's just so many areas that we would like to look at. I mean, certainly we have issues with the climate that we just had COP26. So that was, I mean, they're really important outcomes we'd like to see improved within 2 years. So the climate is a big one on our agenda, but maybe being more specific to our own part, small part within the United Nations. So we'd really like to close data gaps through the continued use of growth of HDX. We want to see more data coming in, perhaps a little bit more more sectors, maybe more automated sharing rather than spreadsheets and so on. So which also means that we'll be seeing more automation, more data serviness in the community. We also want to see more greater adoption of responsible data use through some of the guidelines that we are putting out, and definitely we want to see more a more anticipatory type of humanitarian system where we are acting ahead of crisis, saving lives, acting in a way that is more dignified for recipients of aid, and saving money in the process. So I would say those are the main things that come to mind 2 to 3 years down the line. Thank you.